money supply causing the hardships that we are experiencing today. And what do we do about it? Not too much. Why? Because as long as we have food, as long as we have gas in our cars, our kids are going to schools, there is nothing there that we have to do because we have the greatest power in the history of the world. So why are we going to change it? But why don't we wake up and know is that the causes that we are experiencing now are caused by a pre-planned conspiracy where our total supply of money has been contracted by the bankers for their own gain. That we got people here in this class here that know very, very well with firsthand the evidence that they're literally stealing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of homes every day and steal your neighbors. They don't care. They're only worried about their own self. And I object when bankers tell me that we do certain things is because of greed. And all those guys that work under greed, they don't really deserve to have the life here in the United States. You got something to add?
Mickey,
Wayne?
you had me pinned down. Of course, the key element was to try to get me to admit or disavow the fact that the bank had no assets, that it was actually, that the bank was not actually loaning out of its own assets.
Right.
So if we have a banking crisis and all these people are quote-unquote deadbeats because the bank is out of lending capacity, how did it lose lending capacity if in fact it had none to begin with? In other words, it's been engineered.
Right.
The point of the matter is there's a radical foreclosure that they make more money in the downswing, in the contractual phase, by radical foreclosure policy. The point where he had me, and you all know it, was that he was trying to get me to say, or actually perjure myself, Mr. Jackson, did the bank pull it out, did the bank give you your $117,000 out of its own assets? Obviously we didn't. We monetized. I copped out with a technical term. We created it. Well, if we created it, how can it be contracted? What's being contracted out there suddenly as of last September? Where suddenly the banks were having this big crisis. Because where was the loan capacity to begin with? It's engineered. This economic engineering, a la the Keynesian model. They imputed, I've used a technical term, it's actually from theology, being in the ministry. They imputed value. That's what they're doing. This is a theological system undergirding the economics. They imputed value. Your forefathers understood that doctrine, not taught well in the pulpits today. But imputation of value goes to anything. If I say that this is worth a thing, that's imputation. Our forefathers checked that by saying, look, Congress is going to only issue coin. They knew what they were doing. They understood imputation. Their pulpits taught them that once upon a time. Our pulpits don't teach us that now, but they did once. I copped out with a term. We imputed value to the note. An application is given. We imputed to it $117,000. We said it's worth $117,000. What Mickey was doing was show me where you got that money out of your pocket. We didn't. We just said it was worth that. That's imputation. Presto, monetized, done. We created out of thin air, and the law lets us do it. If you do that in the private sector, you go to jail. If you say those leaves in the tree out there, I'm going to impute value to those at $10 a piece, I'll walk down the street and trying to use those, and you put $10 in each one of those, you can go to jail if everybody doesn't laugh you out first. Imputation is extremely dangerous, which is why, if you'll allow me, Mickey, God's law forbids its misuse. We're dealing here with theology. I would state that socialism, in any of its forms, is first and foremost a hate-mongering theology. It is a hate thy neighbor theology, whereby a few at the top will control the resources of others, in fact, creating serfdom. You know what I said? Creating it. Not simply taking advantage of it, but creating it, provoking its creation making serfs, slaves of people, which is why God's law begins. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. The term Elohim, gods, does not just mean idols or any other god. The triune God is dictated and said that no authority, in fact, judges, rulers, and magistrates are called Elohim in the Bible. When Alfred the Great of England encoded Exodus 20 to 24 into the laws of the Anglo-Saxons, later quoted by Magna Carta, later picked up in England, used in areas like habeas corpus, used in the second Magna Carta, petition of right. All that flow of history came right out of Exodus 20 to 24. It ties down this issue of imputation. Now our churches forgot that. The theology's gone, all but. We're not a well-taught society. With that, of course, goes the economy. Honest weights and measures, what Leviticus 19 calls for. If you don't have honest weights and measures, you're going to end up having people imputing value as they wish. And if they have the power and the capacity to do so by law, they'll universalize the error. What is the only entity that can universalize error? Look for the one that has the power of the badge and the gun and the law. Which is why God says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. He ties down the magistrate. He does not have absolute and universal authority. He has delegated authority, derived authority. I have derived authority as a husband to my wife. I may not do with my wife as I please. A magistrate may not do, a sheriff may not do as he may not do with those under him as he pleases. The Constitution of the United States was formed by the same theology. It's a covenanted theology. Your forefathers in convention called it a covenant. It's been broken. The covenant has been broken. All Mickey's trying to do is demonstrate how they've broken it. They've used a deadly and perverse theology to do it. That's the whole point. I could argue as a theologian, I won't take your time, but I could argue this goes right back to the cross of Christ. The whole issue of Christ's cross was imputation. Now, I mean, we could extend it. It would take us a few more minutes, but the point here is that we are suffering from an aberrant theology that's been encoded into the political apparatus. And the bankers love it because they make a lot of money from it, and now they're being caught. Except that they do one other thing. They create serfs. That which they did not have capacity to lend, it didn't come out of the pocket A and go into pocket B when they gave you that money, so-called. They monetized, they imputed the value. Well, if they didn't have it to begin with, then what happened in September when it contracted? When the bank said they didn't have any more lending capacity, and all the cartoons we see on television about the banking industry, and all the distractions go with, if they didn't have it to lend to begin with, what's been contracted and lost? So the people who have been damaged by monetization, inflation keeps going faster and faster than their paychecks. They can't keep up. They get foreclosed upon. They get beat up with their credit card accounts, and they're called deadbeats. Well, who can stay on that fast track forever? They just keep increasing the heat. The monetization process steamrolls, and people get wiped out. This is why you need an objected, covenanted view of, well, in this case, of money and banking. Our forefathers encoded that in the Constitution. It's never been amended. It's just been bypassed. That's what Mickey referenced earlier. Real value. Commodity money, as von Mises said. As Hans Senold said. The great economists of all testified to the danger of simply increasing paper, IOUs, instead of, if you allow me the term, a covenanted money. Something that has objective commodity value. Therefore, it's restrained in its within the proper bounds of its use. He simply caught them with it. And it's my prayer that he will be able to do that even more effectively when he goes to Capitol Hill.